Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Glenn Jessome from Silver Tiger. Folks, it's not that long ago I was at a Rick Rule conference and this charismatic man approached me at our booth saying, "You guys ought to have me on. I am quite the performer." Sure enough, we have Glenn on, and the next thing we know, he's getting some of the top views on our channel as he talks about all things silver, Mexico, and silver mining. And since then, we've had a pretty fun ride with Glenn having him on here. His stock has performed phenomenally well, and he recently got issued some permits in Mexico. That's a pretty big deal for the company. So we get into all of those things in this conversation. And guys, if you're looking for silver names, this is a company you probably want to have on your watch list. All right, everybody, enjoy the conversation. Glenn, it's great to see you again.
Well, Steve, thank you for having me back. It's been a while. We've been busy, and I'm sure you've been busy in this market.
So, as you and I have been talking, the price of silver is hovering around $67, the famous 6-7, as the kids are saying. Uh, Listen, you've been at this business a long time, Glenn. What's going through your head right now when you look at the price action in silver?
Well, look, if I said, "Oh, I knew this was going to happen. We expected this," I'd be lying through my teeth. Um, the group that I'm part of, out of the East Coast of Canada, Halifax, that group longer than me, for almost 30 years. I've been part of it for 20. Have been making silver and gold in Mexico and started at $250 gold and single digit silver. So this is something we never contemplated. I remember one of my partners, it was only a couple of years ago, we were in Colorado, in between the Beaver Creek and the Denver Gold Forum. We're having breakfast and gold hadn't hit 2000, and he looked at me, or I looked at him, I can't remember, said, "Could you ever imagine if us mining at $2,000 gold?" And both of us looked at each other and said, "That'll never happen. It's just a fairy tale." And here we are today. And look, for us and the way we look at it, I don't build my business model over here. We're going to build our mine. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. That Tiger. We're going to build that beautiful bulk tonnage deposit and that underground mine. We make a lot of money at 3,000 and gold and $30 silver. Where we are now is just, it's bonkers, but it looks like it's going to keep going. What are you hearing? You probably talked to all these chart guys and guys that look over the horizon. What are you guys hearing?
What we're hearing is obviously that there's no end in sight. What I found interesting is I got to chat with Andy Scheckman last week, who is
Okay.
a precious metals dealer from Miles Franklin, and he said that he's never seen anything like the number of actual calls for delivery on the commodities exchanges. So suddenly we've got these huge orders where people are saying, I don't want to settle my trades in cash. I want the physical." And that's something that's kind of never happened before, and it's suddenly happening with more and more momentum every month. So the people we talk to that are in the know, they seem to be very much of the mindset that there's a whole bunch of momentum there right now, and there doesn't really seem to be anything to slow it down.
Yes, there's so many variables. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. We're a member of the Silver Institute. But, I'm a simple supply demand guy because we got to supply, and somebody has to supply this metal. And we see the numbers basically not near enough being made as is in demand. But the number that stirs me. I may have mentioned this to you before, and I talk to a lot of people, but they say, "Why do you think this is happening?" All the things you said are part of it. True silver mines in the world today. There are, I think, the number is around 50. Okay. By the end of next year, 2026, it's going to be, don't quote me, look at the Silver Institute, their numbers, 44 maybe. By the end of 2027, there's only 38 left. People go, "Well, why?" Because as miners, we mine ourselves out of business every day. And, very excited, and we'll talk about it later, that, at El Tigre, we think by 27 we'll be 39. So we're going to help a little bit, but boy, it's a supply and demand issue as far as I'm concerned.
Now, one of the things that there's a lot of people talking about online is we look at a day like today where silver's up like $2 or whatever. which is I don't know what that works out to, 3.5, 4%.
That's a lot.
But we look at all the silver equities, and they're generally flat or up less than 1%. Well, why the disconnect?
You know what? I wish I could answer that because I was a little cranky after we received our permit that we didn't move more. And so I was talking to a real smart guy who analyzed, I won't say his name, who really watches all of the precious metals equity around the world. And, it was only last week I was a little cranky. I said, "Man, we should be moving more." And he laughed and said, "Get in line." That's every CEO of every big producer and small. We're not sure what's causing that, but it has to give at some point. And I think if this continues, you're going to see that catch up, just like we're getting a catch up on the value of silver, against the price of gold also. So, where we are right now, we just have to execute our business plan and build our bulk tonnage open pit, and then transition to the underground. And we're going to be quite fine on valuation. But yes, you're right. Some there is a little lag there, which I think is going to catch up.
So let's talk about the current state of mining in Mexico.
Mhm.
There's all sorts of developers in the mining world that people in our audience are looking at. But when we look at the stocks that have actually had a fair bit of success over the last decade, many of them do seem to come from Mexico.
Of course.
There's been some, we'll say some headwinds there that it's hard to say if they've actually materialized or not. What can you tell us about the current state of mining in Mexico, and what should investors be thinking about?
I think it's absolutely, I mean, the proof's in the pudding with us. We'll get to us in a minute, but you've had me on before, and different administrations and that run countries have different views of the world. In Canada, we have a new prime minister who I think is doing a fairly good job. You have your president in the United States who's running the U.S. the way he thinks fit, and we've had various presidents in Mexico that have done that. The last administration, that was a tougher time for mining. There were no permits, but it didn't slow us down. We just did all the work we had to get out on the other side into the next administration. And look, it's been absolutely wonderful this year. We have, I think, as I predicted, the first permits would come. Go back and look at interviews. Would be the amendment permits, and those came. I think we're over 50 now. I think almost all of them are, and these were some substantial permits to companies like Core. You had the Mulatos mine with Alamos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You saw a lot of acquisitions in Mexico. I don't think people miss that. Silvercrest. You had Gatos. You had a whole number of these projects. Prime was the most recent. Um, but we were all waiting for that first new permit. And there were a lot of big companies, a lot of companies waiting to get that. And, I think that, maybe your viewers know, we were very successful in getting in November the first bulk tonnage open pit permit, new permit in Mexico since 2019. So, yes, I think that Mexico is wide open for business. Permits are being issued, and I owe it to the experience of our team for decades there, hard work, and having that only Mexico knowledge to be able to navigate to put us in a position where we've already started building the next great gold and silver mine in Mexico.
So, Glenn, let's take a step back here. You mentioned that you have received permits, which
Yep.
congratulations on that, the
Thank you.
announcement. I believe for anybody who's following the story, I think it was on November 7th that you guys announced that.
Yep. Right.
Um, uh, let's take a step back and explain to our audience the significance of those permits and what they mean for Silver Tiger.
So, Silver Tiger, we're going to do very simple. People have seen me on here before. Um, in our project, in many projects in Mexico, you have a big bulk tonnage deposit at surface. You want to mine that first, and then you want to transition to the underground. So for us, we did all of the work to drill off 100 million silver equivalent ounces in the bulk tonnage deposit at surface, and more than 100 million in the underground deposit. Remember, this is only 3 or 4 kilometers of 25 kilometers trend. We'll get to the rest, but we spent the last 6 or 7 years doing that. That's pretty quick to get to the point you can build a mine. Now that's not easy to do. We had a bad sentiment in the market, and Mexico, the sentiment was no new permits. What was going to happen? We still have raised since 2020 for our project 200 million Canadian to get to here. That was all bought deal financings. Canada, that's what we use up here, where you're just offered by a group of a syndicate of banks, financing at a certain price, and then they distribute it to Franklin Templeton, Merck, some of the smartest long only precious metals institutions in the world. That's how we've been financed. So a couple of 100,000 meters and a couple of $100 million, you get to where we are today. We've got a big open pit bulk tonnage deposit ready to be built, and that's done. And we've started that. We'll talk about the process in a minute. And the underground almost ready. In January, you're going to see a PEA, the first economic test for our underground, Steve. We're excited to get that out there. And that's where we are. You need a few things to do this. You need that permit, that piece of paper, done. Underground already permitted also. That came with the project. When I bought the project, it was already permitted for the underground. Bulk tonnage deposit at surface first, then transition to the underground. Got the permit. We've got one of the best builders in the world to build it for us. He joined us 2 years ago. His name is Francisco Albalez. He built two of the last big bulk tonnage deposits in Sonora, the state we're in. He drilled them, built them, and ran them for 10 years until 2022. They were depleted. He joined us to build ours. Extremely a good position. And very well financed. We have over 50 million USD in the bank today, and we can move our project a long way down the field with that. So things couldn't be going better for us right now. I give all the credit to my team and their deep, decades-long experience in Mexico for getting us here.
How much more money, or sorry, how much more capital is going to be needed for you guys to hit sort of nameplate
So let's
capacity?
call, round numbers. The bulk tonnage part of the deposit we just permitted for, call that about 100 million US. We will finance and build that first. So, we're half, as the song goes, we're halfway there with 50 million. I will, and that will take us a long way through the build. Near end of first quarter would be my guess. I'll announce when I'm ready, which I have a clear sight line to, some debt that will be what I would call debt with no handcuffs, no streams, no off takes, pretty well straight commercial debt for the balance I'll need to build it. But because we're in such a good cash position, I don't have to rush to do that right now. And every day that goes by, the more I build with the permit, with the cash we have, my debt terms get better and better.
So equity investors don't need to sweat too much about a huge onset
We
of
always,
dilution
we
coming.
always, we always have this battle, Steve. It's a great time to talk about it. And, I have to weigh, making the right decisions for the company. And there's two different types of investors. There's, the institutions that supported me since 2020 with that $200 million. They know how much capital it takes, and they know it's a 10-year process to build a mine minimum. That's a quick one. And so they come in the beginning and they really want to get to that build, and they're there to fund you. They know there's going to be dilution. And then there's the and a shareholder like myself, I'm there till the end. Um, but then I respect my retail investors that they could own the stock for a month, a year, 10 years, or 2 weeks. And of course, they want to consider dilution. And when I make my decisions, I have to de-risk the project, Steve. Um, I weigh all options, and I look at what we need to do as a company. As an example, a month ago, while marketing in Europe, after our permit, BMO, one of the largest, resource banks in the world, out of nowhere. I'm marketing. I'm supposed to be on the road going from Switzerland to Zurich, on to London, talking about the new permit we just got. What giant news! The first one in so long in Mexico. And about halfway through, they came at 6 o'clock in the evening and said, Glenn, we have a lot of demand from long institutions, the biggest in the world, Franklin Templeton, et cetera, own 10% of us. And they think that, now you're going to build, you've only got 15, 20 million left in the bank. You've got to borrow the rest of that money. Do you want to de-risk the project? We'll give you 40 million right now, and you'll have an hour to decide. That's how it happens. And I have to say, okay, do I want to have that 50 million or more US in the bank so I can drive this project? Or do I want to say no and then say, okay, I'll take more debt. The world, the world may change tomorrow, Steve. I always think about that. I don't know what January is going to hold. What if some black swan event happens and the debt is harder to get? There's no more equity. I've not done a service to any investors if I've put us in a risky position. So yes, we issued more shares. I weigh that, but I think that de-risking it now, even with those shares we put out in dilute, the return on the other end for those that want to stay as we build this will be exponential, and it's de-risking it for all shareholders. And there's no one's, it's like being a politician, Steve. No one's gonna love your decision. Some say absolutely fantastic move taking that money now, and others will say you diluted too much. I as the CEO have to make a hard decision, and I think that that was the right decision. Now it's put us in a position with this money where I don't need to jump at debt and I can move this project a long way down the road. We're already doing many things like people say construction decision. We've been getting ready to build pre-building since the summer. We can talk about some of that. This gives me the juice to do that without putting the company, risking or having to wait for debt to come. So I think it was the right decision and I stand by it, but I know that some people, and I respect their opinions, will differ on that, but we feel good in the position we're in. And I think if we build this, when you talk about valuation, we can talk about some of that,
Yeah.
about where we go from here, from there with this fuel. I think people go, wow, those extra shares are not going to hurt us.
So you mentioned valuation, and I know that there's some investors out there that are looking at the Lassonde curve and they're thinking, okay, there's usually sort of a dead period from that point where the discovery's made to
Oh,
actually getting into production. What do you have to say to the investors out there who are maybe a little bit nervous that Silver Tiger's entering a little bit of a lull period?
so here's what I say though. We are cookie cutter Lassonde curve at the Tiger. If you went and looked at that Lassonde curve, we went up, we made our discovery, we had beautiful valuation. We were so fortunate to be one of the ones that got to go up the first hump of that camel. That's the Lassonde curve. That's a brilliant place to be. And then everybody loved us. High grade silver drilling holes. I opened my mouth and said, PEA for the bulk tonnage deposit. We're gonna build it. And it was right down the bottom of that first one. And we're classic, but we're coming out of that now. We're already going up the other side. So we're going to go up that other side. And here's the way I look at this. There's a few things. We're an 18-month build, Steve. We're not 3 years. We're 18 months. Bulk tonnage in Mexico, we're low capex, call it 100 million USD or sub that amount. There's no easy mining, but this is as easy as it gets. You're crushing rock, you're putting it on a heap, you're running it through an out of box Merrill Crow, and it's making a dory bar. You're not underground. So it's easier mining. So that's the second thing that we have to say. Okay. And the reward at the end you should want to stay for. We're trading at about a 400 million market cap Canadian today. Now, I shouldn't even be talking about these numbers, but I'm going to talk about them because they're absolutely ridiculous where we find ourselves. As you know, when we do our feasibility study, our pre-feasibility study, we have a sensitivity to prices. You've heard of this before, okay? And, when we did our study, we were at $26 and $21.50 last year. Imagine. Okay. Um, at those prices, this 9-year mine life for the bulk tonnage deposit, that's only 6% of the ore, it'll be bigger. Forget the underground. It made $40-50 million USD a year. It was beautiful. Now we've gone, think about this in 18 months. If you want this reward, you go all the way over. And today, and I'm looking at it because I still don't believe the numbers. You said this is kind of la la land, but it's not because it's the price today. At spot prices today, this bulk tonnage deposit at surface has an NPV of 870 million US dollars. It has an after-tax IRR of 101%. I don't even know how that comes out of the model, but that's what comes out of the model. It's ridiculous. It pays back in a year, but listen to this. It makes 1.2 billion US after tax net cash flow over those 9 years, called 130 million bucks. That's silly. So if you're here for the 18 months and you're at 400 million Canadian, and this is la la land. I don't build my business model on this. I would look at 50 and 3,500 and I still make 800 million US. But let's just say we are here and it stays here. That 400 Canadian, this is how I value it in the 18 months, is you take the 876, call that 1.2 or 1.3 billion Canadian. We will trade at 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.4 times that built. That 400 is 4 times from here just on the pit on our valuation that we're at today. That's how it's valued. So anyone who wants to stay for that 18 months, boy, they're looking at an alpha return. The two things I think that are going to help us on the way up for those that don't have 18 months, they've got 18 minutes or they've got 18 days or they've got 5 months. As we're going up, we're going to do things that are going to increase our value. I think we should be trading at 0.5 our NPV for a permanent being constructed bulk tonnage mine in Mexico. We're trading far less than that. So there's that room to catch up. We're going to put out an NPV that's going to come in that PEA in January. That's real value. People should say, okay, when they see that, I can't tell you what it is. I know what it's going to be. It's going to be good. And they're going to say, well, that should be 0.25 of that NPV and add that up. And if you add those up, we're very much higher than a 400 million Canadian market cap right now. So that's a move, I think, in the shorter term. Plus, having the PEA adds real value to us. And remember, another thing we're going to deliver, which I haven't talked about very much, I'm going to start talking about. We focused on those 2 or 3, 4 kilometers around that old Tiger mine, and look what we did. They took 100 million at 2.5 kilos. We have added 100 in the pit, over 100 in the underground in that area already, and we have 73 to 100 million in exploration potential. Just tighten up the drilling. That's from our independents that did the pre-feasibility study. We're now going north. The North Tigre mine's just sitting right there. It was the same as the Tiger mine, same vintage. Go look at the press release I put out in November. That was the appetizer. It was the first exploration press release we put out in a while. We're doing the exact same thing we did in 2017. We've been in that underground. There's lots of pictures of it. We've mapped and sampled it. We're going to start drilling up there next year. We've drilled some test holes when we first got there. Same, high grade as Tiger, bulk tonnage deposit at surface. We think during that 18 months, we can get back to being what we were on the first bump. Not only building and going up the Lassonde curve, adding a PEA with value during that for the underground, but let's get back to what Tiger is. Man, where's the next 100 million silver equivalent ounces? We started hunting that 5 or 6 months ago. Get ready for some drill results on that this year. So all of those things, I think, are going to help our climb up that Lassonde curve. And the ones that want to wait till the end at these prices, or even less than these, but good prices, the reward's going to be fantastic.
All right. So Glenn, let's wrap it up with this. You and I sit down this time next year.
Yes, sir.
It's December 2026. You grab a glass of eggnog and you sit down and
Yes,
we
sir.
do this chat.
I love it.
And you say, Steve, it's been a successful 2026. And I say, Glenn, why is that? What's your answer?
Well,
why was 2026 successful?
I'm gonna rely first. Let's go to pricing. You love to talk about pricing. I think these prices are a dream, but I go and I asked BMO yesterday. I said, give me the consensus pricing for the next 5 years. All the analysis, and that's much lower than where we are. But if you look at consensus and the consensus with the prices we're at today, for the next 5 or 6 years, those numbers are showing more than $3,000 gold and 33, 34, $35 silver. Okay. So do I think we're in a new pricing world? I absolutely do. And so let's say the pricing holds. Now I'm 12 months into an 18-month build and everybody's going, wow, this will be the next big producer. He's going to make that cash flow, and that trade I talked about from the beginning at 400 million to a built bulk tonnage deposit in production in Mexico is only 6 or 7 or 8 months away. Wow, that's not long to wait. We should have grown our value greatly. A PEA out that's going to show a high grade underground silver mine, like other high-grade mines in Mexico. And we'll have moved that down the road to a pre-feasibility study so we can get ready to build that. And I hope I got a couple of drills north and maybe a few south, and I'm delivering some of the best high-grade silver intercepts in Mexico. And I think I'm going to be very, very happy with where the value of the company is. So that's what I want you to ask me about next year. How did it all go? And Steve, we have a saying at the company, and this one: do what you say. Sometimes some of the things we said were really hard. We're going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in a tough environment in Mexico, in a tough market. We did that to get to the point where we would be ready to build this project and we would get the permit. I didn't say we get the first one. We just happened to be fortunate enough through good planning, a great team with great decades-long experience to get that. So far, we've done what we said. Now what we're going to say is we're going to build the next great silver and gold mine, bulk tonnage and underground in Mexico. And anyone who comes along for that, if we deliver that, will get an absolute exponential return. That's where we are now. It's exciting.
All right. Well, Glenn, it's always a pleasure when we get to catch up. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I hope, or I wish you guys a successful 2026, which I'm sure it will be. And I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year. Thanks for taking the time to do this, Glenn.
Merry Christmas to you and to all your viewers that happen to look at this, and appreciate. Look, we've been at this a while, man. You remember we started talking
Yep.
years and years ago when it was dark out there, and you've always listened and supported, and this is a great thing for you guys too. As we talked about, not a lot of companies get from those first drill holes to where we are today. And thank you for believing, and thank you for coming along the journey. And now you're going to come along with the journey. I'm going to tell you all about how we build it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, please bring us to site in 2026 or 2027.
Listen, you have an open invitation. Can't wait to get you down there. I'd say by June, July, it'll be full on the go, big buzz. So we'll get you guys down there. I'd love it.
Well, I'm gonna renew my Duolingo account now so that I'll be ready to go for the visit.
Thank you so much, Steve. Merry Christmas.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, if you want more mining content, check out our website over at thedeepdive.ca.